All right, we're moving into the larger melee weaponry. Now, the first one I'm gonna go over here is the first weapon that's exclusive to Outbreak File 2. This is the square timber, a stick that seems to be long enough to swing around. So it's a gigantic stick, according to this game. All right, so yes, exclusive to File 2. You do not get this in File 1, of course. So here's a real-life square timber that I found. This was very easy to find. There you go. Here's a list of all the locations for the square timber. Now, there isn't one that is the same across all 4 difficulty modes, so the next best thing, ones that are in 3 difficulty modes, of which there are 2 that tied for that amount, so I'll go ahead and show those. Starting with the Wild Things scenario, you got the North Concourse. Fairly early in the scenario, where this is found in the southeast area of the concourse, propped up against the wall next to the steps leading to the office. This piece of square timber can only be found in easy, normal, and hard mode. It is not present in very hard mode. The other common location is in the Desperate Times scenario in the first floor lobby. It is propped up next to the wall in the northeast end of the corridor, next to the door leading to the hallway, which usually has a zombie always knocking on it when you first come across it, or at least in my experience. And the only difficulty mode this is not present is in hard mode. Now here's an extreme close-up of the square timber being provided by Hellmaster in-game, and he had to aim it upward in order to get the most effective angle here. As you can see, when it's this close up, the lack of realism behind the texture becomes apparent. Even with an HD texture mod, I don't think you could ever make this look super realistic. So here's the square timber being equipped by all characters. What can I say? It's very square and it's very timber. It's perfectly described just in the name alone. All right, let's go ahead and equip this bad boy and give it a try. I don't know how well I'll do in this confined area. I didn't think about it too well when I set up this hub. Alright, now once again, Mark has a special maneuver where he does a giant swing with any swinging or poking melee weapons. So we gotta see that. Now what's cool is they added the giant swing to his upper and lower stances as well. And we're not done yet. Jim also has a special ability with swinging and poking melee weapons. He has a multi-swing, or somewhat of an endless swing, where you can constantly swing back and forth if you time it correctly. However, if you time it incorrectly, then he loses stamina and has to recover for a second. But to show you that... And this is why I warned you guys, you're gonna hear that squeak constantly throughout the showcase because of this specific ability. Now let's see some collision. And of course, this can be broken down, which if you do, it'll be broken down into a stick. So, plenty of weapons can end up being a stick. And now we got one more, the square timber. All right, let's go ahead and test the square timber on some zombies.
Help me.
No. Okay, well, as usual, I kind of lost count on exactly how many hits that took. So here's the figure on the screen. That's why it's useful. And it appears the square timber deals 80 damage total. All right, now let's switch over to Mark and see if Mark deals extra damage. Because in Outbreak 1, if you remember, he deals extra damage compared to all the rest of the characters because of his special ability. Let's see if that carries over here. Well, it appears it doesn't. So unfortunately, they got rid of his standard buff in damage. However, it's probably because he has more capability with that giant swing now, as you'll see here. Whoa. So he straight up doubles the damage, up to a whopping 160 with his giant swing. And it guarantees the zombie goes flying every time too, regardless of what direction you aim in. Just to show you, it could also work with the upward swing. Looks kind of funny. You gotta be careful in these narrow corridors. Okay, that was interesting. Apparently, if you do the giant swing against more than one zombie, only one will get the full extent of the damage, while the other just suffered normal damage. Alright, also, if you're wondering about Jim's multi-swing, I tested it off camera. It does not contribute any extra damage whatsoever. It just cuts down the time a little bit. The reason I decided not to use Jim for all of the swinging weapons is because I don't want you to hear that mousy squeak too much. Because a majority of the community, I think, agrees that Jim is the most annoying character in Outbreak. In both games, too. Well, that's ultimately gonna conclude the square timber. Alright, now for the next swinging melee weapon, the wooden pole. A pole of appropriate length to swing. Alright, so same wooden pole from Outbreak File 1. You could get it many ways. You can find it in some places, but it's also able to be gotten by breaking a larger weapon. Specifically a scrub brush, a long pole, or a spear. Alright, so comparing to Outbreak 1, it is exactly the same in both the icon and the floating model, by the looks of it. And another thing, in Outbreak File 1, this came after the scrub brush, but in this game, it's coming before because they increased the power of the scrub brush for this game. So that's why it's in this order now, and I'm doing this before the scrub brush. So here's a real-life comparison. So here's a list of locations for the wooden pole. As you can see, there is not a single location for hard mode. So I guess the only way you're gonna get it in hard mode, at least in the regular scenarios, would be to break something bigger, like a scrub brush or a long pole. Anyway, out of the locations we see here, there's only one that's in more than one difficulty, so I guess I'll show that one. This is in the underbelly scenario in the women's restroom east, on the B1 level of the subway. It is on the floor inside the rightmost toilet stall. You see it in plain view as soon as you enter the place. Now here's an extreme close-up of the wooden pole in-game in an area that's far away from the hub because we didn't really have a choice. Now here's the wooden pole being equipped by all the characters. You would think having the jagged end it does, it would be more of a poking or stabbing weapon rather than a swinging weapon. Alright, so let's go ahead and test it out. Definitely not a good area for this one. I'm gonna have to go back a little bit.
Hi. Hi.
All right, and then let's see some collision, really close up. And of course, if you break the wooden pole, it becomes a stick as well. All right, now let's go ahead and test the wooden pole on some zombies and see the actual damage difference, if it has any. All right, so the wooden pole appears to also cause exactly 80 damage. So there is no difference in damage between the wooden pole or the square timber. Now, realistically, both of these weapons would likely break before you defeat any zombies if you're playing in finite mode. I, of course, am playing in infinity mode, so I can give you a full amount of hits for every weapon. Alrighty, well, I think that's enough testing the wooden pole. So considering it does the same amount of damage as the square timber, I'm gonna go on a limb and say the difference between the two is the durability. I guarantee the square timber has more durability than the wooden pole, considering the wooden pole is already a broken weapon. So in that regard, I probably should have done the wooden pole first since they're the same damage, but the square timber I think has more durability. In any case, it doesn't matter too much. All right, once again, let's switch over to Mark and see his giant swing with it. And once again, it straight doubles the damage. He's swinging for the fences. Ugh. It's too bad it doesn't do extra damage if you hit him perfectly with the stub of the wooden pole, because that shit would cut. Alright, so that shall ultimately conclude the wooden pole. Now for the next melee weapon, the scrub brush. This is a poking weapon, of course. A cleaning brush with a long pole. Alright, now this definitely has an updated icon compared to Outbreak File 1. The model, on the other hand, is exactly the same. And here's a real life scrub brush I could find for it, for comparison. Here's a list of all the locations of the scrub brush. Looking at the previous weapon showcase, this weapon has a lot more abundance in this game. However, only half the fixed locations at a mere 1. So I'll show that one. This is in the underbelly scenario in the men's restroom west of the B1 level of the subway. It is underneath the leftmost toilet stall door. Now here's an extreme close-up of the scrub brush provided by Hellmaster in-game. From this angle, it almost looks like he's mildly scrubbing the wall. Here's the scrub brush in all characters' hands. Unlike the predecessor game, I am not in the most appropriate area for this weapon. I don't think there's anything to scrub in this abandoned place. Alright, let's go ahead and test it out in this confined area.
Hey, over here! Hey! Hey, you!
Hi.
Now let's see some collision. And of course, if you break the scrub brush, it forms into a wooden pole. All right, now let's test the scrub brush on some zombies and see how much stronger it is compared to Outbreak 1.
Go!
Alright, the scrub brush appears to do 85 damage. It is more than double the damage it had from Outbreak File 1, which is pretty nice. In Outbreak 1, it only had a damage of 40. Between 9 and 10 hits of the scrub brush to take down a zombie. Alright, now let's once again switch over to Mark and see the giant swing. So yeah, consistently, the giant swing just doubles the damage straight up. It doesn't seem like how it was like in Outbreak 1, where the percentage of increase was random and wasn't a fixed rate. Alright, well, that is gonna conclude the scrub brush. Alright, now for the next melee weapon, the long pole. A relatively long wooden pole. It is relatively rigid. Alright, so as it says, it's like a longer version of the wooden pole, but it's also like the scrub brush without the brush part, considering the scrub brush says a cleaning brush with a long pole. Look, literally, when I switch between long pole and scrub brush, it looks exactly the same, just adding the brush part to it and a slightly longer base. That is it. Alright, so compared to Outbreak 1, exact same model and exact same icon. And once again, this is also a craftable weapon that you could use David to create by combining 2 wooden poles. Now, unlike Outbreak 1, where that was the only way to get it, you can pick this up in certain locations, which I'll go over in a second, but here is a real-life long pole that I compare to this. So here's a list of all locations for the long pole, and there are 2 locations that have a fixed area that spawns a long pole. The first of which is in the Wild Things scenario at the front gate of the zoo, same area I showed earlier for the butcher knife. It is on the ground next to the snack cart and the cars on the eastern edge of the area. Now this specific spot only applies to easy, normal, and very hard modes, but hard mode has a slightly different location here at the front gate, where instead it would be on the ground next to the wall in the southeastern area, where you see these 2 green herbs. Now the other area you're guaranteed to find a long pole is in the flashback scenario at the suspension bridge. It is on the ground next to the bridge on the east bank. Now this spot only applies to easy, normal, and hard modes, with very hard slightly switching it up by being on the ground in the corner of the clearing on the east bank, where you find the stick normally in normal mode. Now here's an extreme close-up of the long pole being held in-game by Hellmaster. And here it is being held by all characters. I guess another way you could look at it is a very long and thin square timber. Alright, so let's go ahead and test this out. Oh, by the way, I forgot to show you guys aiming and moving in this stance. Not much of a difference there. And same with like all melee weapons, it seems. As soon as you use it, you stop moving. But yeah, let's see some collision. And if you break a long pole, it breaks back into a wooden pole. All right, let's test the long pole on some zombies. Yeah, green zombies aren't the best enemies to test weapons against, especially blunt objects, because they can poison you. So the long pole has a flat rate of 90 damage. This is 40 points more powerful than its Outbreak 1 counterpart, where it only had a damage of 50. All right, switch over to Mark, see his giant swing with it. And sure enough, it's double the damage. It always looks so brutal when he goes for the upper one, because it comes down hammering on the zombie. Alrighty then. Well, that is ultimately gonna conclude the long pole. Alright, now for the next swinging melee weapon, the curved iron pipe. A pipe made of iron. It's curved a little. While the regular iron pipe is probably just simply a pipe made of iron. Alright, so yeah, this is actually a deteriorative state of another weapon, and I'm starting with it because it is slightly weaker. So here, of course, is a real-life counterpart to a curved iron pipe. So compared to Outbreak 1, the icon has definitely improved a little bit. As for the floating model, I feel like in this game it's slightly more defined, just with all the speckles on the iron pipe. Maybe it's because of the shader increase, so you see more detail, but other than that, it looks to be exactly the same. So here's a list of all the locations that you could pick up a curved iron pipe, and just like Outbreak File 1, there is no fixed location across all difficulties. And once again, there's only one location that's in at least 2 difficulties. This is also the easiest one to come across if you ask me. This time, it's only in easy and normal mode. and it is in the end of the road scenario in Central Passage 1 of the Umbrella Research Facility. It is on the floor next to the wall near the flames on the southern half of the passage.
There we go.
Now here's an extreme close-up of the curved iron pipe being wielded in-game by Hellmaster. Of course, in this location at this angle, he had to aim upward again. This will go for any swinging weapon in this exact spot. Now I know some of you might be distracted by what's in the background, but keep your focus on the weapon, people. Now here's the curved iron pipe being held by all the characters. The way it bends towards the character, it almost looks like they're about to sing into it. All right, let's go ahead and test it out here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then let's see some collision.
Yeah.
And of course, if you further deteriorate it, it becomes a bent iron pipe. All right, let's go ahead and test the curved iron pipe on some zombies.
This shit.
I will admit that multi-swing does bring the time down quite a bit, and it is very useful against a crowd of zombies like that. Yep, so the curved iron pipe does a base damage of 90 as well, compared to the long pole. And once again, it's likely the long pole has more durability than the curved iron pipe. So I didn't really consider durability when it came to ordering these weapons, I guess. But in any case, it's the same damage and caused around the same amount of hits as the long pole. Now, of course, let's switch over to Mark and see his giant swing with it. Yep, double for 180. Boom! You gotta love that. Alrighty. Well, that's enough entertainment from the curved iron pipe. That's its conclusion. All right, now for the regular iron pipe. A pipe made of iron, as I predicted. All right, and of course, here's the real-life comparison. And just like the curved iron pipe, the icon looks a little updated, more polished out, while the floating model looks exactly the same, just a little more speckled, if anything. Now, here's a list of all of the locations the iron pipe can be found in Outbreak File 2 in every difficulty mode. And just like its predecessor, this is by far the most abundant weapon in the game, not just melee weapon. Now, out of all of these locations, there are 8 that have a fixed area across all difficulties. 4 out of the 5 scenarios have 1 fixed location each, with End of the Road having 4 alone. Starting with Wild Things, the 1 fixed location is in the elephant stage of the zoo, and it's propped up next to the wire fence on the northern side of the stage. In Underbelly, the 1 guaranteed location unfortunately is not the most convenient. It is the very last area you can access in the scenario, the ventilation tower. It is on the floor in the northeast area of the platform on the 5th level. Next, you got the flashback scenario, and the 1 area that's guaranteed to have an iron pipe is the hospital back gate. The common spot is on the ground next to the fence. This applies to easy, normal, and hard mode. However, in very hard, it is on the ground in the southwest corner of the hospital building, where you'll get a concrete piece in every other difficulty.
This is dreadful.
Next, you got the desperate times scenario, and the area guaranteed to give you an iron pipe is the underground parking garage, a very iconic area. The common spot is stuck in the ground near the vending machine next to the eastern door, which this sorry weaponless AI-controlled broad just snaked. This spot applies to easy, normal, and very hard mode. But in hard mode, it is located underneath the squad car on the north side of the parking garage. Now you can only access it if you're playing as Mark or you're playing online and 2 of you push the car. Now, as I said, the last scenario, End of the Road, has 4 areas that are guaranteed an iron pipe. The earliest of which is in the special research room of the Umbrella Research Facility. It is on the floor next to the ventilation tunnel that you enter the room through, in the southwest corner of the room. The next one isn't until the construction site in the urban area downtown. This is propped up next to the wooden fence near the generator in the southeast corner of the area. The next area is the Main Street North in the urban downtown area, and that is on the ground next to the ventilation grating in the southeastern area of the street. Now, I'm showing this area with limited time, and this is because of the path I took. You could end up in this spot much earlier in the scenario depending on the path you take in the underground waterworks. This actually comes before the construction site if you take the path where you don't get swept away by the flood. And the very last area that you're guaranteed an iron pipe is on the elevated highway. The common area is on the ground next to the construction barriers in the southeast area of the highway. Now this applies to easy, normal, and hard mode, and very hard you could still find an iron pipe inside the back of the military truck in the southeast corner of the highway, not area. You have to go a little further south, or on the ground where you find this assault rifle magazine in normal mode that I'm in here. Now for an extreme close-up of the regular iron pipe in-game, in the same fashion as the curved iron pipe. Now here's the straight iron pipe being held by all the characters. As I said in the previous video, it is far more appealing when it's not all curved out of shape. Though you gotta give the curved iron pipe credit, it could be worse, as we'll learn later. So we'll be really quick about this one. Let's go ahead and test it out.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And of course, some collision.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, eventually, with enough hits with the iron pipe, you will curve it out of shape a little bit. There you go. All right, so let's test the regular iron pipe against zombies. Should be slightly stronger.
Wonderful. Shit!
All right, so about between 8 and 9 hits of the iron pipe. 20 points stronger than the curved iron pipe, which makes sense. All right, now switch over to Mark. See the giant swing. Whoa, 220. Ooh. Alrighty then. Well, that's gonna officially conclude the iron pipe, the straight one.
You all right, buddy?
Yeah, thank you. Wait a second, she's human!